Okay, welcome back to Entering the Matrix once again, Nikolai.
Hello.
Hello, hello. Um, so I want to go on a little different track today. Again, just different things that have been top of mind. And the route that I wanted to take for this conversation was kind of the idea of changing the avatar and how does this affect the Matrix, or does the matrix and the programming change when you do different changes to the avatar?
And
So
what do you mean by that? What do you mean change the
we're
avatar?
we're gonna unpack that. We're gonna
Yeah.
because it's different pieces of this change the avatar. So
Okay, let's go.
the first thing that I wanted to get some clear understanding on and see if you could unpack, do do naming conventions attribute power, understandings, or traits for the soul? So, i.e., let's take you for example. Okay, so if Nikolai
Was
wasn't
Ivan?
named Nikolai, he was named Peter, right?
Yeah.
Your parents are like, hey, Pete, we're gonna call you Pete.
Yeah.
Well, if that was the naming convention when you were born, what impact is that going to have on your soul, your personality, or your structure from that perspective when we start to look at different naming conventions?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think we gotta separate multiple layers, and we should go back to the formation of a baby in mother's womb,
Mm-hmm.
and so the old version of Nikolai that thought astrology and all that stuff was bullshit needed once started seeing that it actually works, uh, was looking for a rational explanation, and there is one. So there are a bunch of studies confirming that electromagnetic frequencies and waves impact the way DNA replicates and forms. It actually waves of energy reprogram the DNA formation. So as baby is forming in a mother's womb, we are exposed to specific waves from the sun, from the planets, based on how planets position. So electromagnetic frequencies, the let's call it the cocktail of electromagnetic frequencies of waves at a
Mm-hmm.
specific point on the planet at a specific time is different, let's say in 1985 versus 1989 in Africa versus Europe versus whatever. So there's that. So that's
Okay.
a fundamental thing. Depending where we're located and we're being formed, the DNA is being formed in mother's womb, all that process is unfolding. So that here is basically a scientific explanation why astrology and all that stuff works. However, astrology is approximation of that because for years we've been trying to study to understand how this universe, how this specifically planet and us on the planet work. However, due to bad rep to everything that is related to let's call it spirituality or specific type of energy expression has been marketed, or the branding has been ruined by Vatican and other religions, because all the witches or people who understood, because witch in Russian, for example, is ведьма, ведущая мать. The way it translates is a knowledgeable mother. So a mother, a woman who has access to all the metaphysics to understanding how the universe works. So hence all the witches, because they understood how things work and tried to pass on that knowledge to regular people, which ultimately making them sovereign, hence less controllable, less manageable by that version of a political structure or instrument of mass management, which was religion. They got burnt. So all that area of metaphysics, esoterics, of those types of sciences,
Mm-hmm.
there are three bucket applied, what we call applied sciences, the biology, physics, and whatever. That was like, okay, we should study that because that way we can fix the physical avatar and we We can teach kids that if you fall from the second floor, you'll break bones because there's such thing as gravity. And then we can build machines and we can build a technocratic civilization. So that the branding was not ruined. But esoterics about learning about human and humans' expression in the context and environment where they exist. And metaphysics is the studies of how all system works beyond gravity and etc. Basically, how all the processes in the universe work. So those two got poorly branded by those structures, and hence we stopped studying them, and they kind of became a little bit of a prohibited knowledge, and then it went undercover into Freemason lodges and etc. And by the way, most of the ruling of the world is deeply knowledgeable about those two other areas of knowledge. They retain that knowledge, and that's how they applied it for their own purpose. That's how they managed to run such large numbers of people and manage them and keep them non-sovereign, using that knowledge. Using that knowledge to program matrix, to program egregors or energetic containers, to program all these things. Like you take, I don't know, Russian American government, they have departments that are in charge of that. And like I have real life examples from that, how some of my friends were called into those departments and they were like, hey, we see you're doing specific energetic things. We can see it in the energetic field. What the fuck? Not fully aligned with our government and our vectors. And it's real.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's just nicely mismarketed to the external world. I was like, oh, it's all bullshit. For example, Russia recently introduced a law that does not allow marketing any kind of esoteric or spiritual services.
Really?
You're not allowed to do it, yes, because Russian market, Eastern European market is much further ahead in that. Like, for example, right now people in the West starting to talk about incarnations, I don't know, like spirituality becoming popular. All that started, I don't know, a decade ago in Eastern European market. Every second person now is astrologist, numerologist, healer, and etc. Because the Western systems were not as entrenched. They tried to get entrenched because, remember, Soviet Union collapse, all systems disappeared. West came in to Imperial West came in to take resources of Russia, started entrenching, but not that much time passed, right? It's like 30 years, and only so much of that infrastructure was being able to be installed, right? Whereas, like, for example, US, UK, and all the other Western countries that ultimately the what do they call vassals? How do you pronounce that word?
Yeah. Vassal states.
Vassals of that system. That system has been entrenched for over 100 years. So yeah, coming back to that. So coming back to your original question, it was an interesting long segue to come back.
Yeah.
So the fundamental one is basically what was the state of energy as the body was formed. Hence, the soul selects parents. We discussed that.
Yep.
Hence, selecting geographical location and timing, right? Because it wants to load with specific energetic mix. So another way we decode that, once through astrology, another way we decode that is through numerology. And numerology is based on naming conventions. So Nikolai carries one weight, Ivan, Mitch, Peter carries different energetic weight. But that's more of a flip. That's we use because my soul wanted to load somewhere where it would be named Nikolai because it would carry the energy that it carries. There is another, for example, whole what is it called? There's a whole, like, let's call it sub study of names. Each name actually has a description of quality it carries, and it's
Really?
pretty fucking accurate.
Where do you get that? I want to discover
just
that.
ask ChatGPT, Grok, whatever. And the experience I recently had, like, I kind of knew it intuitively. So let me paraphrase. It's not the name that carries. It's like your mother intuitively gave you a name to reflect some of the energies that you carry.
Mm.
So like that's very important not to confuse it. But in some scenarios, if the mother is not intuitive and they go through a non-intuitive spreadsheet process of ranking and allow, I don't know, people to vote how to name baby, then it could create a misalignment. So I have a friend who has two names because there was an argument in a family. There was a heavy argument in the family what to call the daughter, and ultimately, I think there was like a matriarch grandmother who forced one name, but mother wanted a different one. So she goes by both names, both first name. There only one in the passport that the grandma wanted, but the mother was calling her the name she wanted because that was the intuitive, that was the name she was supposed to have. So hence, she almost have two subpersonalities living within one body, because one that is originally that the soul wanted and another one that was imposed from outside. And let me come back to the name, the experience I had. I kind of knew that Nikolai is like is all about leading people, leading masses for their own good. Victor of like Nikolai is kind of like a democratic leader. That's the explanation. But there is a deeper one. I was chatting with a friend, and she typed in and asked for extensive explanation of like qualities and characteristics of her name into DeepSeek, the Chinese AI model, and gave her. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And she was talking about it, and I was like, why don't you look at mine? She looked at mine and sent me the stuff, and I read through it, and I was like, wow, there are quite a few of those that are quite spot on. So we use that like basically it works similarly as numerology, because name, you take each letter, convert it to a number, it carries specific energy, and like you combine there are specific formulas and etc. So it's more of an explanation of those fundamental energies that loaded in. And I'm going to give you another example, coming back to the two names, the friend with two names. Right now, there is a Russian-Ukrainian war unfolding. When person steps in to fight, they're given their soldier name or code name. They take on a different subpersonality as a result. And that is who is the one. And some of those subpersonalities, they take on different energy, and sometimes that allows different entity or soul or conscious to come in and enter and live this and start living in that avatar. And in some scenarios, some of those names that are taken on, because every day they're called that name, they're not called Mitch or Nikolai anymore. They're called, I don't know, Spaniard, I don't know, Samurai, whatever their code names are, right?
Yeah.
They start living life of that energy. And some of them turn into aggressive maniac killers. Some of them, like, they basically start turning into different people because they start associating with that type of energy that's carried by that name. So that's an example of how it works from outside. Ultimately, and that's how a soul can get pushed out from the avatar, and another soul or entity or whatever starts running that avatar, because because let's say soul loaded into this avatar and wanted to be, it was loaded because it kind of knew this avatar will be called Nikolai and would carry the energy that resembled the energies of the soul, the mix of the soul, energetic mix of the soul, right? So now if I start calling myself Samurai every day, every minute, I'm dissociating with the energies of the soul. So I'm disconnecting, I'm kicking it out. So because at the end of the day, what soul is just body connected to a specific sector of consciousness. There's big consciousness. Each of us is a specific sector of consciousness. So it's just literally a link. So we're connected. The avatar is connected. The consciousness is not in the body. Well, in reality, connected inwardly. I'm showing it up as easier to show. So as soon as I start calling myself differently, I'm starting to destroy that link, and I'm starting to connect to someone else or to some other energy, to some different sector of consciousness. So that's why I remember when we had one of our calls with you, I gave you a suggestion to get rid of your actor name.
Yeah.
Because you have an actor name, and that's what's happening. So when you get rid of that, you will start going into your factory default, which are the most organic and the easiest for you. When you take on another one, they could serve you as an instrument in a specific moment. But then once you pass that life where they serve you an instrument, they become a heavy weight, or they pull you in a different direction, or they cause a bunch of issues, and etc. And to further build on this, in spirituality, in different schools of spirituality, Buddhism, Vedic, Indian Vedic school, they give spiritual names. However, uh, most of them are, no, I shouldn't say most, a lot of them, or subset of them are given from mind rather than following a correct process. And then also that person gets distorted. When that spiritual name is given correctly, it actually a superpower that is given to you. But once again, it's an instrument, it's an energy that's given to you. You might use that name from, let's say, Buddhism, Vedic school, or yogic school, or whatever, for a moment, but then once you graduate it, you'll automatically stop using and release it. So a lot of practitioners in yoga meditations, they have different names, not their originals. And some of them are not given correctly. And then it becomes same situation as with the names in the war. They lead them in a wrong direction. But the ones that are given correctly actually supercharge you. To give you an example, Maxim, partner in Atman, he was given one, and the way they do it in Dzogchen Buddhism, they have this big lottery spin thing, and there are like papers with names there, but they're like Buddhist names, and they
Mm-hmm.
spin it and they go it, so the matrix decides what is in the highest alignment, and it
Mm.
pulls it out, and the name that he was given was protector of knowledge, and Buddha was protector of knowledge, and like etc. And everybody's like, because that one apparently comes out once in, I don't know, very rarely, because there are many, right? Imagine there are whatever number of papers, right?
Yeah.
And everybody's protector of knowledge. We haven't seen this one. And back then, when he was getting it, he was still, let's call it, in the mid part of his journey. So he was like, yeah, whatever, guys. Like, I'm a regular guy. I'm like a regular dude who drinks beer. What kind of protector? And it played that way out. That's how his life played out. And has been in. His job was basically to gather all the lost metaphysics, esoterics knowledge and put it into a structure that's understandable by modern human. Because if you read a lot of Buddhist texts or Vedic, Indian Vedic texts, they're quite metaphorical and applicable to the person living 2000 years ago. Like, hey, if you, I don't know, if you do this to a horse, this will happen. And then you got to decipher what the fuck they mean. Like, horse, I don't, haven't even seen a horse in my life, especially a person born in a city, right? So and I think we briefly chatted in one of our episodes the way there are specific cycles to the knowledge. The knowledge works for around 2,500 years, but then civilization evolves so much that it needs to be reinterpreted. So that protector of knowledge, his job was to reinterpret it and take fragmented knowledge and bring it into one. And that's the book that was written by our team with Maxime. That's called Book of Life, Atman Alignment. So far, only first, there are 12 books, 12 short books, only one was translated to English, and I'm sensing the energy is finally arriving to translate the other 11 to English. So it's coming. And for now, if somebody is listening and viewing, it's affordable. Each of them is €20. You can buy it on our website. And there are going to be 11 other books translated very soon. So that's basically, given that name, the protector of knowledge, whatever. Of course, it sounds different in, I think they might have used Sanskrit or whatever. There's a specific word for it. I'm just
Yeah.
translating that word. So that's basically how naming conventions and astrology and etc. will interact. And one more quick thing to add: the way you name the business, that's also, you're putting a specific energy mix specs into the business. When you do it intuitively, everything happens the right way. When you not do it intuitively, from like, I run a spreadsheet analysis and I kind of like this, but the clients will not like it as much, and I'm going to pick this, then you're already starting in your own place. That's why it's so key to come back to the intuition.
Mm. So, for example, when you look at naming conventions for the Pope. Like every time someone gets
Yeah.
elected, or I
Yep.
don't even know if they're necessarily elected, chosen, let's just say, to be, okay, you're going to be the Pope. Like the latest one now, we have Pope Leo, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And before that was, I don't even remember the guy before that.
Francis,
Uh,
I think, or something
oh
like that.
yeah, Francis. But they
Somebody
have
was
it.
Francis.
Yeah, but they have a different name, and then all of a sudden, as
Yeah.
soon as you're Pope, well, you're
Yep.
given a whole new name. What's going on there energetically?
Same thing. They have the access to the knowledge, and they're picking out the names based on the goals of the structure of Vatican, what it's trying to achieve, and the name they want to give to the leader. So it's given, so that gives him an additional energy, so it's easier for him to lead the egregor of Christian religion in a specific direction. So they're like same as governments. Those guys have access to all the knowledge. It's very strategic.
Mm.
The dates
And
are strategic. The names are strategic. Everything is strategic.
yeah, interesting. So,
Like if somebody's trying to invade, like for example, like I'm pretty sure this stealing, what's his name, kidnapping Maduro,
oh, Maduro, yeah,
specific date. Yeah, specific date. That was predisposition for that operation to go in a specific way.
really?
Yeah.
Oh man. So, for example, one thing that I'm curious about, um, when you have people that say you're a kid and you have one name and then you reach 18 years old and you're like, I hate my parents, I want to
Yeah.
have this name.
Yeah.
What's going on there when the avatar itself is choosing another name versus the parents or the intuition from the parents that gave that child a specific name? What's
Mhm.
changing there, if anything?
Yeah, definitely. So the constructive situation is where parents basically gave a name, last minute changed the name and gave it from their mind rather than their intuition. And then the kid becomes of age and feels the name doesn't fit. Kind of the example I gave you was my friend, where grandmother, authoritarian grandmother, overrode the decision of intuitive mother. Um, so then the kid just realigns. The less constructive is the kid is growing up in a modern city society and etc. and picks up a bunch of fucking entities and maybe trips on mushrooms or acid. Uh, and by the way, when you're tripping on any kind of substance, your connection, you're basically for a moment disconnect from avatar. You're basically doing astral travel, what they call it. So
Hmm.
you live your apartment, which is your avatar, empty, and a lot of times unprotected. So there's a big problem of ocupados in Spain, where you can literally, if no,
Squatters.
yeah, squatters. Where, well, in Spain it's legal. If you enter and start living in somebody's house while they're away, they cannot kick you out.
Wow.
It's crazy. So it's just major problem in Spain. So that's what happens while you're away, while you're out of your vessel. Another soul or another entity can take control of it. And so let's say somebody is 15 tripping mushrooms and went for astral travel, see all types of green goblins or whatever fuck it is, right? And another entity or another soul goes in and they start feeling like their name doesn't fit them anymore. And they go
Uh-huh.
rename themselves to fit the new energies more, to resemble what's the essence. Once again, energy is fundamental.
Yeah.
Everything else is just expression of energy. So in that scenario, the energy of that avatar has shifted. So the outside world has to shift as well. The name needs to shift. The bodily features will shift. Somebody was skinny and had amazing metabolism and could eat whatever, out of nowhere can become the fattest person in the world. Or never had any kind of issues, not a single broken bone, starts breaking bones. So energy has changed. Everything else has to adjust to match the energy. Energy is the fundamental element. Everything starts there.
Hmm. And so with that, the cleanest form of energy then would be the the intuitive name coming from the parents.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Whatever they give you the name intuitively, because like the soul observes how things should play out organically before loading, right? And it's like, oh, okay, there's well, it might actually work slightly differently. I want to load here. They pick the parents,
Yeah.
load, and then the mother, because the baby is in the womb, is so connected with that energy, then the mother produces a name to resemble the energies that are in her, because
Mm.
those are different energies than her energies.
Mm.
But if the mother is like goes into like, I don't know, taking some pills because she's anxious or whatever, all that intuition gets distorted, and whoever needed to be named Roman becomes Muhammad.
And what do you do? For example, you'll have, I think, even, well, I'd be curious, for example, because I know, I'm not sure how it is in Belarusian culture, but in Russian culture, you always have
Fathers?
the middle name as the father's first name,
Yes,
correct?
correct. Same Belarus. All like, I think most Slavic cultures have that.
And how does that shift energy at all, or if it doesn't?
Mm, I don't think it does, because ultimately the way energy passes on through your father is through the last name. That's key. So actually, when the woman changes her last name, then she loses her energetic superpower of her family and shifts to the energy of husbands. Whereas if we take example of Spain again, or Latin cultures, they have super long names because they keep stacking them,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So they're like merging. They're trying to basically, what they're trying to do intuitively is to merge the superpowers of all the families, because each family last name is a name of egregor, a family egregor. It's same as business. It's just a family egregor. There's business egregor. I don't know. There's political party egregor. There's brand egregor, whatever. So this is a family. It's a brand. Carries
Yeah.
specific energy. And so when the woman changes, she loses the original energy. In some situations, it's could be detrimental to a woman. So more correct is to add both, so you have both. But in reality, as we transition to the sixth matrix, we will see the disappearance of the last names, because what it did, it really fragmented the true lineages, because the lineages become tiny and weak. So for example, my last name, Bratkowski, I don't know, there are like on this planet, how many, maybe 100, 1,000 Bratkowskis. That's the size and the power of a Gregor. So it became small, whereas previously there were like bigger lineages. So for example, your soul is from Viga, my soul is from Mintaka. That is a big, everything is a Gregor, everything is energetic structure. That syncing with that is much more powerful than syncing with my last name.
Hmm.
So we're gonna start the disappearance of the last names, because it's fragmented a big powerful structures to tiny ones that barely carry much energy, especially when they're not maintained through time well. And we will see the emergence of some kind of new system. And by the
Hmm.
way, the middle name, the way even the middle name frame, my father's name is Vladimir. Middle name is phrased as Vladimirovich, meaning belonging to Vladimir, a son of Vladimir.
Hmm.
So by adding that ending, the only thing it's implying, I'm belonging to this man, or I'm belonging to this family. Well, this man specifically within the family. So it's kind of a fragmentation even smaller, rather
Yeah.
than being connected to all Bratkowskis, right? I'm like connecting to this tiny one, to this tiny particle.
And what about what about coming back to the numerology aspect of it? When we look at, for example, people that specifically give biblical names, for example, right? Or names of
Mhm.
powerful figures, is that again tapping into an egregor of a past name? Like if you're looking at saints like uh, Saint Michael or Saint Paul, where
Yeah.
specific biblical sort of names, do those have their own different weight, or?
Well, first of all, okay, Michael, Paul, whatever is just a name. It all
Mhm.
depends on intention.
Okay.
If the name is given with an intention to connect that baby to that energy, that can have impact. If I'm just like, if a mother is like, oh, Archangel Michael helped me throughout life, I'm just gonna call baby Michael, but not really with intention that this baby is like Archangel Michael,
Mhm.
then no connection. But if there is an intention, there could be some kind of link. And so Archangel Michael, I believe, is just a um, a human name to call a bluish purplish energy, and that's energy that burns out everything that is not true. So that's the protection.
Mm.
Do you see what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's a referral. It's an IP address, the way they will call it in technology. It's an address, or in a day to day material world, every house has an address, so you can find a destination. So names is just a address of a destination of a specific energy. So Nikolai Bratkovsky, who was born on this and this date, is a full IP address to my point of consciousness, to my whirlpool of consciousness, or my soul. So
Mm.
that's why when we do work, we request that, so we connect to the right place to see the data, the information about your consciousness, not another Mitch, or another Mitch Hartwell, or another dude who looks like you.
Mm.
So it's just an IP address. And so if somebody goes with an intention of connecting, so Archangel Michael is an address, same as, I don't know, 55 John Street, to an energy that is cleansing energy that burns anything and everything that is low vibration.
Mm. Okay. And what happens to the avatar, just switching tacks here a little bit,
Yeah.
um, with physical changes? Like, and the reason I'm saying this, I recall reading or seeing, this was many years ago, how, for example, someone could get a nose job and it would change something deeper than just personality. But I don't know if that's actually true, or what are your thoughts on that when we look at, surgeries or cosmetic enhancements, and what that either changes for the avatar itself, or for the program that's running the avatar, or does it change something in how that person then connects to their soul energy? What's kind of going on with
Yeah,
that?
it works both ways, right? So we kind of already touched on this. On one end, somebody could have picked up an entity or changed their energy and etc. In constructive or destructive way, and out of nowhere they start feeling they need a nose job to actually reflect that new energy, right? And the flip side of that is you change the avatar. Hence, let's call it, you change the shape of a vessel, and now even if you didn't have that specific energy that reflects the new shape, you are inviting now an energy so it matches. So let's say somebody did the nose job because it's cool, or like all this lip jobs or whatever, and now they're basically inviting some kind of energy. Like, so in most of scenarios it would be an energy measuring lips and noses, or something along those lines, right? So now there is that energy living there. And similarly, it works in another way. As a person harmonizes themselves, as goes through their evolution and evolves, shape of their face changes, the way the teeth are positioned changes, their cheeks, like jaw, like everything changes because DNA changes. So as you change your worldview equals fundamental energy. Since everything has to reflect energy, the body changes, and every cell in a body changes on a the longest one is a 7-year cycle. Some changes every day, every minute, and etc. But the longest one is 7-year cycle. So every 7 years we have brand new bodies. So now imagine if somebody goes through extensive growth and changes drastically in 7 years, they could come out looking quite differently. Like not of course super different, but like facial features, like could have been like fat and out of nowhere didn't do any exercise and lost weight because there's no more energy that needs to carry all that additional energy weight, like accumulation of something, right? And that's another thing. People, yes, we can go to the gym and lose weight and reprogram through that activity that part of the body. Um, in some scenarios, if we don't reprogram it, we have to constantly maintain it. If we stop going to the gym, people like, some people skip a week, they've already gained 5 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
But the easiest one, you change worldview that accumulates weight. You don't even need to go to the gym. The weight will disappear because it has to mimic that. I'm observing this in myself right now. Like, I rarely gain weight, but I've gained some weight as like the past couple of years was a lot of energetic work. And it was substantially less sports that I love. That I should say loved. There was there was inharmonious relationship with sports. I escaped into sports that I enjoyed. That's the right word. So now I do sports when they truly bring me joy, rather than from a place I want to escape into endorphin feelings, pumped in endorphins, and then be like endorphins, and be like, oh, I feel much better now. And so I gained by some weight, I mean like 5 kilos. And that, me, by the way, spending a lot of time in bed doing energetic work, in eating whatever fuck I want as much as I want. Like, I could literally 3 days straight just eat cakes. So I gained some weight, not a lot, but whatever. And then I was like, oh, I need to like work out for that weight to go. I was like, no, I was just, but I gained weight for a different reason. Not because there was some program. Like, otherwise, if I had a program to have a lot of weight, given how I was eating and my horizontal lying down lifestyle for extensive periods of time, I should have gained at least 50 kilos, if not more.
Oh, wow.
I gained only 5. And so then I was like, why do I need this 5? So when I start looking into it, as you change your worldview, coming back to energy, and we've chatted in the previous episodes, energy, DNA is close to energy. My DNA was reprogrammed on a cellular level, and it needs material. So that extra weight is that material. I was like, oh, so it is actually constructive extra weight. And now, as the process starting to come to some kind of shouldn't call it to an end, because evolution always continue, but there was let's call it a big intense sprint. We're coming to an end of that sprint. The weight is starting to disappear on its own because the body is using up the material, and it's like, oh, like, I haven't changed anything in my lifestyle,
Yeah.
So, and that's and if I would summarize this whole meta insight here, energy is fundamental. Everything else is a mirror of energy. So hence, there is energy, then you get specific name, you get specific date of birth, you get blah, blah, and the list goes on, right?
Got it. So, and last thing I wanted to go into here, because I know that, again, I've read a number of things where people have this experience when we look at organ transplants, right? Like,
and
you
they pick up energy of another person.
Yeah.
Yep, real.
But what's going on there? And then even to kind of meta out for a second, what's your thoughts, or what has the Matrix told you about, for example, that idea of organ transplant? And then, even if we look at how the soul is separate from the avatar, because I know, for example, I think it's certain religions where they would say, well, you have to be buried and you have to have all your organs, or you need specific things, otherwise you're not going to heaven, or you're not going to the other side. So, bringing all that together, what thoughts on organ transplants?
So, 2 very important things. First, we'll talk about transplant, then we'll talk about death, which is very important.
Yeah.
A transplant, if you just get a transplant and you're like, oh, thank you to Peter for his kidney, and that's it, you like forget about it, and it's like, it's now my kidney. So you overwrite it now with your energy with your DNA starts integrating. It's functional organ. In reality, by the way, there's new studies where we can regrow the organs, and there are multiple confirmed scenarios where people regrow the organ. But because there was a limiting belief that we can't, you need to take from somebody else, put it in. It's more explainable, and then it still gets rewritten with your DNA. However, if a person, oh, I'm so grateful to Peter, and keep thinking about it and keep feeling that it's Peter's kidney, part of Peter, that energy of Peter, of his consciousness, starts living in that avatar. So it becomes a multi-family dwelling.
Mm.
And hence, Peter loves rock, and you only listen to classical music, and now you start like, fuck, rock is pretty good. I've never liked rock. Because now part of Peter is living in that person, and you got my multi-family dwelling, and now you got to start liking rock too. So that's the transplant thing. Regarding death, there's a lot of misconceptions about death. I've been recommending, I think I recommended to you, great, very short book by a spiritual leader of a spiritual community in Italy. He's died, but he written some good texts. A bunch of them distorted, but some of them are really good.
Hmm.
And one of them is called "Learning to Die." It's very short, can be read in I don't know, an hour or two. And I'll share a quick insights. The best way of exiting this planet is to burn the body.
Hmm.
Until even a single cell is alive, the soul or the consciousness cannot fully disconnect from this dimension that we call planet Earth. So when people put a body in a wooden box and it rots, first of all, the wood has to rot through, and etc. Basically, I think the bones survive for such a long period of time that the consciousness or the soul cannot fully disconnect from that fucking vessel for the
Wow.
longest period of time. And that, for the exit becomes unpleasant. It can be a pleasant exit where it's like burnt, you're out and you move on to the next incarnation or to the next sector of universe or whatever to continue your evolution. when you're buried, or even worse, when you're like Lenin in the Kremlin, whatever. What is it called when you mummified?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and preserved. Well, you're stuck. Or your soul is stuck, and a part of a transition, you can get stuck in between worlds, and in between worlds, or there's just it's different dimension. So we have this dimension that we observed while being fully attached to this body. Then we have a dimension where souls exist, and then between transitionary, the buffer world is a messy world, because there are a bunch of entities there who are stuck, cannot go to the high vibe dimension or wherever it's supposed to go, and cannot go back into the world of forms. So that's what we call so-called in the popular culture ghosts. They're just
Mm.
blobs of energy flying around. Each blob of energy has quality, and they're like fighting for energy there. They cannot go there to get. They cannot incarnate to get energy through this dimension, nor they can move on to get energy elsewhere. They're stuck in this in between world. So best is the body gets burnt and the soul can move on.
Mm. Okay, interesting. So then what so are most people then, if for example, if we're looking at maybe not so many that are burned per se, so a lot of souls are getting stuck, or more and more souls are getting stuck?
Yeah, that's why another way to end up in those so-called in-between worlds is taking psychedelics. So that's why when people take psychedelics, they interact with a lot of interesting characters, because their point of consciousness, their point of we call it focus, jumps into that space and starts interacting with whatever and whoever. And a lot of some of those interactions are not very constructive, or they could seem constructive but not be constructive, because ultimately some of those entities need energy to continue doing something, to continue with evolution, for example. But because they're stuck there, they cannot fully evolve. So then they persuade, while you're in this in between worlds, some good looking, I don't know, elf shows up and persuades you, hey, dude, you should move to Germany from United States, and instead of being a software developer, you should become a PR manager. You start living that entity's life. You start living, and so that elf now starts getting access to the avatar, or elf. You could pretend to be elf. There, you can take any form and play games and whatever. So could just, let's call it, blob of energy. And so you're like, okay, it seems like a good idea. Come out of your mushroom trip
Yeah.
and move to Germany and start becoming a PR manager and whatever. And that elf is now uh, once again, you end up with multi-family dwelling. And in some
And so then,
scenarios,
no, I was going to say, so in that scenario, let's just say that
yeah,
happened. How would you then disconnect that?
it was intention. So we live in the world, everything in this world, in this universe, is created with intention. Intention is energy.
Hmm.
And one of the universal laws is free will. Everyone
Yeah.
has free will. We can create whatever we want. And of course, we discussed Matrix 5 was a school for beginners so that we don't fuck up the planet completely. There was a long buffer between the intention and manifestation. So hence, when somebody thinks, I want to kill that person, there is a delay of that event so the person can fucking rethink before killing. Uh, we've discussed in the previous episode, the buffer is disappearing. So be very careful. What's the saying? Do not be afraid of God, be afraid of your desires, or something like that. Or I might have invented it, but I feel like there's one like that out there. All your desires gonna come true without a buffer now. And everybody wanted to be creator of a reality. The day has come. You're creator of the reality without buffer. You were always a creator of reality, but with a buffer. That was part of Matrix 5. So you fucking learn how to create constructively. Now the buffer is being removed. And if you haven't learned how to create constructively, your desires will kill you because you're creator of your individual matrix. And of course, let's say if another person is also a destructive creator, then you'll be brought together so you kill each other. So it's easier for Matrix. So, and one example is Russian-Ukrainian war. It's what do they call it? Meat grinder. It is
Yeah.
actually
Meat
meat grinder.
grinder.
It's actually energetic grinder. All the low vibe energy is gathering, so it can be all the avatars that's stuck in low energies are brought in one place, so they're recycled, so the planet continues its ascension in a vibrational level. So hence, like, because right now there is a conversation, oh, Second World War for Soviet Union only was 4 years, and etc. And this is now 4 years or something like that. The intention of that event is different in the Matrix. It's a grinder. It's like a removal. In America, the meat grinder is a little bit different. It's drugs, fentanyl. But people say, well, but not many people die from fentanyl. Guess what? America is the biggest drug manufacturer and dealer in the world. The only thing, some of them are legalized, are the ones that are prescribed to you by pharma. Same thing. People are losing their minds, dying, and etc. The effect is similar, but the marketing is different. Fentanyl, very rapid, accelerated exit. Whatever blood pressure regulating pill the person is on leads in the same direction because it's treating the symptom. The body never gets treated properly for the root causes, so the body dies earlier. Now it's just going to accelerate even further because there is less and less energy supplied to the avatars in a fifth matrix. So previously, your blood thinner or whatever fuck the person was taking could have sustained you for extend your life for 10, 20 years. Now it's going to extend it for, I don't know, a year, half a year, maybe less. So that's where we stand now.
And do uh, when you look at the proliferation of SSRIs, it's the same thing there going
Same
on.
thing. So
Yeah.
you're not resolving an underlying root cause of a specific state or behavior. you're just basically blocking serotonin absorption in your hormonal system. So more serotonin stays in the blood, so you experience illusionary happiness.
Yeah.
But the amount of energy hasn't increased. And if we go back to our original episodes, happiness or joy in Russian, radost, ra, light in every language. Everybody knows ra is light, stands for light. Dost in Russian means sufficient. There's sufficient amount of energy in the body. So if somebody is experiencing depression, anxiety, and all that stuff, it's energy related. Light equals energy. So if there is not enough energy and a person starts taking SSRIs, they haven't addressed the issue why there is a lack of energy in the body. So
Yeah, they're
they've
just masking it.
basically installed a time bomb. So there, it's
Ah,
like a first step towards earlier exit from this body.
okay. Well, that's it for today. I definitely want to check out that Learning to Die book that you've been.
I'll
Who was
include
the
a link
author?
also in the description. His name is Falco. That's his another example. Everything comes back to where we started the episode. It's his taken name, not real name.
Ah,
He has an Italian. I don't remember his Italian name. So he has taken, and they were giving out in that community names to the avatars, but I don't think it was done in a fully congruent way. So that's why that community right now is suffering, and people living not the best lives. And I wouldn't call it a spiritual community. It's a community that has spiritual knowledge that they haven't fully understood and integrated in day to day life. And some of that knowledge is distorted, but it is what it is. It was a journey, and it served the purpose for whatever evolutionary purpose for whatever avatars needed to experience that. So yeah, his name is Falco, and I'll include the link to the book. And in simple terminology, explains some decent concepts about navigating the death of a close one. Like for example, like not having any emotional attachment. I'll give you an example from my experience. My last grandma died during COVID. And what's interesting, she survived COVID, but then died from some stuff from hospital.
oh wow.
um, yeah, but she was kind of ready to exit. So she'd been talking about it for a while, and she's like, "Why am I here?" and etc. So I didn't get a chance to chat to her on the phone. My mom talked to her, but then like, oh, people could think, oh, I didn't get a chance. I should have called. Once you develop your energetic capabilities, you can connect to any consciousness IP address. So I just connected to her soul, and I was like, "Hey, how's it going?" We had a good conversation. No, what is it called? No grudges on her end, tiny ones on my end. She didn't allow me to go fishing when I was 5 years old. So I was like, we joked and laughed about it, and she moved on. The whole idea. Whereas if person is really mourning and not letting the other person go, it creates a very rough exit experience for that consciousness. So the ties that there's still, because somebody keeps thinking about that person, especially with an emotional charge, it creates another hook, not just the body. That's another thing. So, for example, some mothers mourning dead child, that now that soul cannot reincarnate. It could have already reincarnated into another pregnancy, your own pregnancy, or in some other family, but you have a picture on the wall, you think about that child forever, and this is just a vessel. The key thing is the soul. And by the way, souls kind of have their names, and the names are just a sound. It doesn't sound like Peter or whatever. Some of them sound kind of like names. Some of them might not sound like names, but they're like approximation of the sound, because sound is just a specific frequency or vibration of an energy or specific mix of an energy. So it works exactly the same way. So we want to detach from the concept that we are the avatar. Avatar is just a vessel for us to play the game in this dimension on this planet. That's it. That's a vessel. Like we bought we bought swimming trunks and a t-shirt. We don't fucking mourn over it when it gets dirty and we rip it and it's time to throw it away. That's the same concept, because
Okay.
what's connected to the avatar in most of the scenarios, or paraphrase, what's connected to the avatars that have souls, that soul in many scenarios is infinite. And there are souls that are infinite, and there are souls that are still earning the right to become infinite, meaning to stay here forever. Once you serve, like when new souls are formed, they go through a specific experience of gaining experience, specific experience of going through evolutionary journey, gaining some experiences, demonstrating to universe that it's useful to universe, and then it could be, we call it, the soul gets crystallized, then it becomes infinite. So hence when the soul like gets crystallized, it's infinite. You just change the vessels and you hop around different sectors of universe and have different experiences. And here we are now, here having this conversation in this dimension. But part of the soul, because also souls are big, could have different conversation in different bodies and different sector of universe.
Hmm. Wow. Interesting. All right. Well, looking forward to next week and see what becomes top of mind. And well, let's also see even just what Matrix has in store from a geopolitical
Let's
perspective,
see.
because
Things are heating up.
things are heating up and things are cooking, to say the least. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I guess the constructive positive from things heating up, it's all constructive. The old world is being disassembled. So if somebody does not see the underlying, let's call it, currents of energy on a surface, it might look like the end of the world. It is the end of the old world and the beginning of new world, which is better. So welcome this, and welcome this. Some people might also call it destruction. We can call it transformation. So things are transforming, and something needs to be destroyed because they don't even fit in the new world. So there is some destruction, but it's clearing the space for the new structures, ideas, philosophies, economic structures, educational system, political system, whatever it is, to come to the surface. So it's a time of great opportunity.
All right. Well, looking forward to it next week then.
Till next one.